everyone. Welcome to Achieving Success with Olivia Akin. I'm your host, Olivia Akin. Each week, we will discuss the roadmap of achieving your personal and professional success. We give you real-life stories on growing personally and professionally to achieve your life and career goals with the help of some top-notch guests. Today, we are speaking with Julie Schreiber. Julie is a consulting winemaker. She has spent over 20 years in the wine industry, creating high-quality wines that reflect the characteristics of the grapes. You can find Julie on LinkedIn by searching Julie Schreiber or going to chezjulies.com. Hello, Julie. It's fantastic having you on the show today.
Thank you. Nice to meet you finally.
To start off the show, can you tell me what success means and looks like to Julie Schreiber?
Sure. It's interesting. I've done lots of different things, and over the years, I really think getting respect of the people that are in the industry you work in, as well as the I would say the guys in the cellar, the clients you work with, just having the respect of people where you ask them to do certain tasks and they're like, sure, no problem. Or the other day, one of the guys who works in the cellar said, I'm making my first wine. I made a rosé and I'm making it like you do. So I thought, well, that means something to me where the guys that are actually doing the work in the cellar for me respect what I'm asking for. And so that really makes a big difference to me. In addition, I would just say financial stability. About 5 years ago, I left my full-time job and started consulting full-time, and it felt like a big leap of faith. And I still am doing it, and I can actually live on what I make. So that feels very successful to me.
I love how you brought in their respect as well as financial stability,
Yeah.
but really the respect of your peers and the people you work alongside of. I think shows to the impact you're making, but also the level of, oh, they're really hearing me. They see me and they're following in my footsteps. I'm leaving that impact behind. Julie, winemaking is an art form. How did you get into the wine industry?
Well, that's kind of interesting. I actually have 3 college degrees. My first was a bachelor's degree from University of Massachusetts in hotel and restaurant management. And then I went to culinary school. I went to the CIA in Hyde Park, New York. So I cooked professionally for about 14 years. And then I was like, okay, this is not working for me. Basically, I was living on $13 an hour with no benefits. So I was like, okay, we got to do something else. So I went back to school, got my master's degree in enology, which is the study of fermentation from UC Davis. And I've been making wine ever since. The reason I chose wine, I guess the biggest thing is when I was in culinary school, we had a wine class and it was like, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks long, 5 days a week. And we tasted a whole bunch of wines and they taught us, the very basics of winemaking. And I was like, I don't understand that. I want to understand more about what that takes and what it means. And I just thought, okay, let's do it. And then I took chemistry and I thought, well, maybe I won't. But survived studying chemistry. And so I figured getting the degree was a great idea. I highly recommend going to school in the topic you want to work in because it's mostly about meeting the people. So once you've met all these people, it makes it so much easier when you want to go on to the next job or you want to be like, what's this employer like? Or what's the quality of this place? It's really easy to pick up the phone and call somebody and be like, hey, how's this place? So the personal connections are really important. So I've learned that through every type of job I've had. It's really helpful.
And I think you mentioned two very important aspects.
Mhm.
One, I'm going to follow up with in a moment, so I
Okay.
will ask that next. But I think the point that you made of going and getting an education in something you want to do, whether that's college, a certificate, a certification course, whatever it might be, can be so important because, like you touched upon, it gives you the networking piece,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
We've all seen with colleges today data they share with you or pieces of different aspects of the curriculum, right? We don't use 5 years from now, 10 years from now, things change, right?
Mhm.
Especially with the growth of technology. However, what doesn't change through that program is the ability to connect with people who are going into your industry
That's
and
right.
build those relationships. So I think that's so important that you mentioned. I want to touch upon the other aspect you brought up, which was chemistry. And the
Yes.
fact that when you went in and you started doing this and you had that chemistry piece, how that was important, but you struggled through it. But also, a lot of people don't think of having chemistry mix with winemaking and
Mm.
really the
Well,
depths that you
it's
have to go into.
interesting, right?
Yeah.
So the prerequisites for studying winemaking are basically the same as pre-med. So it's biology, microbiology, physics, chemistry, organic chemistry, all that. And for me, I think what happened was I was taking an exam in the chemistry class, and my brain said, "You're not supposed to know this stuff." So maybe that's being a female. Maybe that's my twin brother wanted to be a doctor when we were younger and then changed his mind. But so I think I was like, that's his thing, not mine. But so once I got over that hurdle of the mental side of studying something that was totally foreign to me, then I did better. So, by the time I got to organic chemistry, I was getting A's in the class. But that first chemistry class, wow, it was a challenge.
It would definitely be a challenge for me too. So I totally understand, right?
Yeah,
Sometimes we got to lean into our strengths, but also know what our strengths aren't. And
right.
and, but sometimes, like you said, you don't really have that choice. I think one of the amazements to me too, and you brought it up and reiterated it, was the fact that all the prerequisite prerequisites for winemaking and getting that degree is the same as pre-med. So
Mhm.
for you, what were the things that you learned through those classes that apply to winemaking that a lot of people might not think about?
You know what? It's an interesting job because winemaking has so many different aspects to it. I think this time of year, because we're just finishing up picking the grapes and the wines are still fermenting, you're just thinking about the logistics of deciding when to pick the fruit, doing a healthy fermentation, getting kind of a target style that you're looking for, and then getting it into barrels. So there's a whole lot of things going on there. And then during the year, you're blending and you're getting the wines ready for bottling. So in the case of Sauvignon Blanc, that one, which should be bottled maybe December, January, something like that, pretty quickly. Whereas Cabernet, it takes 2 years in the barrel. So there's lots of different opportunities depending on which kind of wine you make. As far as the chemistry side of it, it's when things don't go right. You have to like kind of figure out how's this fermentation going? What can I do to make sure this is a healthy fermentation and it gets dry? And so then you start having to be like, okay, so some of that is microbiology because you're like there's actually yeast cells doing the work, and so you're trying to make them happy. And other times it's like uh, you're thinking about the acids and where the acid level is and what works and what doesn't. So there's a lot of conversation about the pH and TA of the wines. So you're thinking about what's pleasant to somebody, what's healthy for the fermentation, um, especially when you're thinking about the Cabernet and you are going to have it in those barrels for 2 years. You're not trying to make vinegar. You're trying to make something that people want to drink. So there's times where you're like, oh, I got to do something here. So it's sort of like, I guess I would call it like herding cats. You're constantly like trying to make sure the wine does what you want. So you kind of turn into a control freak. The other aspect of that is you're making something that's very expensive. So you have to like have the, I guess it's a mental strength to be like, okay, I'm not going to focus on the fact that this tank costs $1 million, something like that, right? So you kind of have to have the confidence to make something and you know that it's going to turn out. So I think the fact that I've been doing it over 20 years, in the beginning, I was, more nervous and very careful and very methodical. And then over time, you kind of be like, okay, I've worked with that vineyard before. I've worked with those grapes before. I know how things are going to turn out. In this case, this year, the vineyard I've been working with for years, I finally got asked to make wine out of some different blocks. So I got to make some clones we hadn't made before, and that's been kind of exciting. So even though I've been working with this client for 7 years, um, we're doing something new and a little bit different. So which is great. I have 5 different clients, so that's the other aspect of this job is that I do something different every day. So that's exciting for me. It's much more interesting.
And one thing I love that you brought up there, because we
Mhm,
all do it no matter the industry, is sometimes we get so wrapped up in how much something costs or what can be lost if not done right. And we
mhm,
end up getting in our own way with it. And sometimes you have to take the step back and just look at the fact that it's the job. It's what is the task in front of you.
mhm.
For you, and you brought up having different um, clients and you get to work on different projects as you consult with different companies and wineries and different people to deliver great tasting. What is that process like? And as a consultant, what is the process like coming into an organization and consulting?
Well, it's kind of interesting. Lately, I've had quite a number of clients where the winemaker or assistant winemaker left and they need a quick, like, oh my god, I need somebody with experience to come in and help us get through this rough patch. And so they hire me and then I come in and I fill that gap for them, and then they hire somebody else and then I onboard that person into that job. So it's kind of an interesting thing when I do that kind of work. So and then for some other people, I can help them buy wine on the bulk market and create a wine and get it bottled. So there's many different layers of what I do, but the big thing is we try to come up with what is the style of this wine. So there you have to kind of almost personify this wine, right? So you're like, oh well, this wine should be, um, let's say, I'm in Sonoma County, and I'm making a wine that's for the average consumer, and maybe the wine's like $50 a bottle, and so that tells you something. Whereas if I'm making a wine that's $20 a bottle, and then you're so it's really affordable for everybody. So you're thinking, okay, maybe the $20 one is what we call cheap and cheerful, right? So it's easy to drink. Somebody's going to buy it today and drink it tonight. There's maybe the $50, the $100 bottle. They're going to buy it, but maybe they're going to hold on to it for a special occasion. So what's the style difference there? So you have a lot of conversation first about what you want this wine to be, and then you can be like, okay, do we keep it one varietal? Do we blend things together? How's the acid? How's the alcohol? All those kind of technical things. So we do a lot of different trials of putting blends together or doing trials of how's that finished? Is it long enough? That sort of thing. So it just depends on the client, what we're working on, and whether we've had that conversation about, visualizing who's going to be buying this bottle, who's going to be drinking it. Because the nice thing when I was cooking, I could see the people get the plate of food in front of them, and I could, see them enjoy it. Whereas with a bottle of wine, I never get to see the people, so I have to kind of visualize who's getting it and what kind of wine they want.
I love how you bring that up too. It is about the experience and being able to visualize who the client is and what they are going to be using it for, no matter the industry, no matter the product. Because at the end of the day, if you can't visualize that, you can end up making a product that someone does not like, especially wine. So I want to dive into that a bit and talk
Mm.
about for people who might be listening and might want to understand some of the differences. What is the difference between someone who's going in and looking to buy a $20 bottle of wine and enjoy right now, go to a party and enjoy it, compared to someone who might be looking for that more expensive bottle of wine for a special occasion? And what are some of the things to think about?
Oh, as a consumer?
Hmm.
Um, well, I think what we try to do, because a couple years ago, got to go to Barolo, and when you buy a Barolo, you know that it needs to age like a decade before you drink it. So there's super big tannins, and they just need a lot of time to kind of age into being really drinkable. So that imagine how big and tannic they are versus the thing you're going to buy today and drink tonight. It'll be softer tannins, maybe a little bit higher pH, so um, it's easier drinking. So then you think, okay, am I having this as a glass on its own, like a cocktail hour, or am I having it with a meal? So that makes a difference too, right? So it's hard when you're standing there and there's like a wall of bottles. Like, how do you decide? So, or you're looking at a menu in a restaurant and you've got like 100 bottles listed, right? So for me, sometimes it's like I've had a wine from that region. Let's say I've had a Russian River Pinot before, so I know that I like wines from that region. So then I'll kind of figure out that section of the list or that section of the wine shop. Um, then you're like, how much can I afford? Because some people would buy a $200 bottle today and drink it tonight. Not very many, but we do try to make the wines taste different. So if it's a really big, expensive wine, we probably put it into barrels and a lot of newer barrels and aged it for a long time and put like years of time and energy into something like that. Whereas, that Sauvignon Blanc, I make it and I get it in the bottle and it has no time in barrels. And it's intended to be something that um, is bright and fresh and really great in the summer, sitting out in the sun, having a picnic or something, right? So the styles are very different. And so um, I think about that and what people want and what they are gonna really like. So the interesting thing is I used to make wine for a famous basketball player, Yao Ming, and I made wine for him that was sold in China, but they don't normally drink red wine there. So you have to think about, okay, you want something that's approachable and drinkable, and I guess, I have heard of people over there putting Coca-Cola in their Cabernet. So I'm like, "Oh, so they like it a little bit sweeter, a little bit fruitier, a little bit, easier to drink," right? As opposed to maybe somebody who's been drinking wine forever, they want something dry, more tannic, a little bit more linear, that sort of thing. So those are the things I think about.
And that's a great point. As a Coca-Cola girl myself, I very much understand wanting to put Coke in things. Because the Coca-Cola company, they made something. And that's the point you brought up too, is understanding the taste buds someone might have and the purpose they're drinking it. And
Mhm,
you really have dove into that in different aspects today with really understanding the aspect of how quickly are you looking to drink this? What occasion might it be? Because it does play a role, but also understanding your own taste buds. When you go into the consulting process and you go into a company, what are some of the things you look at and that you try to advise on as they're going through the process of creating a wine, or, for China, and for example, with China, of like, okay, their culture and how they look at wine is differently. So we need to approach that differently. How do you approach that whole process?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I was thinking about that. Let's say I have a person who contacts me because through my website, people will contact me and they're like, "I'm thinking I want to create a brand," and this person has never been in the wine industry before, but they think, "Wouldn't it be really cool if I made X wine?" And so I get a lot of those kind of calls where they're like, and then we start talking, and they're like, "Well, I was thinking like 100 cases," and I'm like, mm. So that's the first thing is, uh, are you sure you really want to do this? Because the wine industry is hard. Making the wine, creating the wine is the easy part. Selling the wine is the hard part. So I frequently have that conversation where I'm like, uh, let's just be sure, for a small guy who's just thinking, wouldn't it be fun to be in the wine industry? That they really think it through because I know people that where they thought it would be cool. They bought a piece of land, they have their house on it, they planted a vineyard, and now they have grapes. And now they have to figure out what to do with this wine they've made. And then all of a sudden, their whole garage is full of wine because selling it is hard. So that's one aspect of it is dealing with people that are that small that they haven't figured out you can only give your friends so much wine. Then you have to find somebody else to buy it. So that part is one of it. Then if they're a bigger company, it really depends. I spend a lot of time like observing what they do. I'd like to come in and not like immediately want to change everything they do, but try to see what they're already doing and see where I can make suggestions or tweaks. Sometimes it's a matter of creating protocols so that they're consistent in how they request things, how they do the actual tasks. So that's one thing where I'm like, do you have written work orders? Do you have standard procedures of how you do things? Because not only is it, easier for your job, but it's also easier for the people you're asking to do a task. Is like they understand that there's a consistency there and they know that you know what you're doing and that they can be like, "Okay, we can make this work." And if they don't have that, then, I'll go through and try to understand the history, especially in a winery where the other winemaker left and now I'm trying to decipher what it is they've done in the past and try to kind of take what they've done in the past and continue forward. And that's how I can train the next person on here's how you communicate with the people in the office, here's how you convey work to the people in the cellar, that kind of thing. If they are a bigger company than that, um, then there's all sorts of opportunities for um, communicating within like the hierarchy of the business. So it just depends on the size of the business you're working with. The other thing I do, I'm a consultant for the Tri Valley Conservancy down in Livermore. And in fact, they hired me to be a consultant for the appellation. So anyone within the appellation can contact me and my time is already paid for. So they can ask me technical questions, so we schedule monthly tastings, competitive tastings, so we can start to understand style. Um, we do some webinars where I bring people in to talk about um, different aspects of viticulture, winemaking. So that is more of like a relationship building kind of a system, and also being there to help them this time of year, like you're doing just fine. Everything is going to work, or here's a detail you hadn't thought of, that kind of thing. So it just depends on who I'm working with.
I One thing that you had brought up too, and really through that answer
Hmm.
exemplified, was the fact of scaling up or down and
Hmm.
understanding the whole process and that system. For you, when people come in and you're trying to either scale up or identify, is this really what, have you thought about all the moving pieces, right? Those wines, and how does that conversation happen? Because especially with someone who might have left, trying to get the taste back because something might not be written down might be hard, or you think the wine line needs to grow. Like, how do you have those conversations, and what does that look like when you're trying to identify whether something should be scaled up or scaled down, or trying to pinpoint the science behind the line?
Well, it's interesting because I have the luxury of not being with the on the marketing or sales side, so they have to decide how big they want to go. That part I don't have to worry about. They have to decide because it's expensive. Every aspect of wine is expensive, so they have to decide also themselves, right? So if they're going to make uh, for one, I would never make 100 bottles or 100 cases of anything. Uh, just turning on the bottling line is too expensive. So just to let's say you hired a mobile bottler and they came to your place and you were all ready to bottle, just for them to show up and turn the wine machines on, it's going to be like $2,500. And then you're going to buy glass and labels and corks and you probably already paid for all that wine. It's just too expensive. So you have to, at some level, you have to be like, okay, you're that small, you have to figure out A, how to produce something, but B, you have to then figure out how much you're going to charge for that bottle. And is that like a year's worth of wine? Is that enough wine for you to make it through a whole year? Or are you going to have to come up with more wine halfway through the year? So there's lots of aspects there, right? If you're a bigger company, uh, I think they already have so much in motion already that I'm trying to figure out how their systems work uh, to sort of fit into that life for the time period that I'm there. So that's kind of interesting. I'm constantly figuring out like how to maneuver within a new business and a new company and how to work with everybody. So um, that's like happens almost every year. I have a new company I'm working with. That's an interesting aspect of my job is just the amount of relationship stuff that I deal with. I guess one big thing, being a consultant versus being a full-time employee somewhere is I feel like I'm much more honest with people about what they're doing and how they're doing it. Um, than I would be if I was a full-time employee. Um, this is not where I make all my money. I have another job, so I can tell you the truth, and I can just be more straightforward and honest about, you know, this aspect of what you're doing is not working, and we need to change it. Or I found this mistake, this error, that somebody made, um, and I just here it is, rather than trying to figure out how to be a softer touch, I guess. When I tell people things, I'm pretty honest with them.
And I think
um,
that's really important too, is
mhm,
having that ability to have the transparent conversation and being like, you brought me on for this purpose. Here is the thoughts, here's the suggestions, and this is the direction we need to move in.
mhm.
And it gives you that ability. And that's why they brought you in, for that expert knowledge. For you as a winemaker, as well as a consultant, what is something that you think a lot of people might not know about the winemaking process that you have experienced?
I guess that I always feel like people have very romantic ideas about being a chef or being a winemaker, but it's really pretty much hands-on, kind of dirty. Sometimes in really industrial situations, very not very romantic. I mean, I guess people have this vision of this gorgeous vineyard and some chateau, or I don't know. It's not always that way. So um, there's a lot more business to it, I guess is the biggest thing. So I do taste wine every day, but it's not like I'm drinking it, right? If you drank it, then your day would be rather short. So I spit it out. I guess that's the biggest thing. But I can taste 150 wines in a day, um, and I do that pretty regularly. So I think that's part of it is people just like, how do you do that? It's like one wine after another. But I also I highly recommend sparkling water. It's good for cleansing your palate and moving on to the next wine. Um, so part of it is just, I guess if you're tasting wine and you want to understand and convey what you're tasting to other people, you just have to start focusing on every aspect of like you're eating food, you're walking down the street, you're just make yourself more aware of the senses that you have. So, like, what's the difference in taste between uh, Granny Smith apple and Red Delicious? They taste really different. The texture is really different. So it's that kind of thing. Like every day, it's on my mind, like all the different senses that I use. So I think maybe that's more of the cool stuff is the blending and putting things together. And I guess I would also explain to you if you had a blend of a wine, I think of it like a major chord in music. So the high notes are the acid, the low notes are the tannins, the structure of the wine, and then the middle note is the mid palate or how things feel in your mouth. So for me, I'm frequently explaining to somebody about Sauvignon Blanc. It's very linear, so it kind of goes straight down the front to back of your mouth. Whereas maybe that really expensive Cabernet is fills your whole palate, so it's broader in your palate, but it also has a concentration and depth. So it how it feels in your palate and how you taste it is really different. So that's kind of things that I talk to people about. Like, is this doing what we want the wine to do?
And I love that. And I love how you brought up the fact that you really do have to use all your senses and really
Hmm.
think. And I think sometimes, as you said, there's this romantic side. People think about winemaking and how it is. And in reality, you have to always be thinking about the taste of it, the smell of it, what someone might be eating with it, or
Hmm.
are they not eating with it?
Yeah.
How drunk someone might get off it as quickly, like, right? What
Hmm.
is the purpose? You brought that up earlier. So for you as someone, when you go out and drink wines,
Mm.
right? We're going to flip it a little bit. When you go
Yeah.
out and you drink a wine as a consumer, what are things you're thinking about when you pick your wine and you're drinking it?
And you know what? I really only drink wine when I have friends over at my house or I go out to eat. So people are always surprised that I don't drink more, but it's like working in an ice cream shop. How much ice cream do you eat after working in an ice cream shop? It's not that much. So I would say, as a consumer, let's say I'm going out to eat with some friends, and then I try to always order the food first, so I know what I'm having with my meal, or if I'm having it at my house, I know what the menu is, because that makes it so much simpler to figure out what I'm going to drink, right? So if you are in a place where you're with people and you're having fish and the other person's having meat, for example, then I'm more likely to do either a rosé or a Pinot Noir because they have aspects of going well with both foods. So I'm thinking a lot about uh, maybe it's something super fatty, so I want something more acidic because it'll counterbalance that. So I don't know. Uh, let's say you're having quiche. There's like the eggs and butter and pastry and all that. You're probably more likely to want a white wine that's got some acidity to it because you want to break through all that fat. Whereas, I don't know, let's say you were having like a big steak, you'd probably want something that's bigger and richer and can handle all that big flavor. So that's where people have the big Cabernet. So it just depends on the type of meal you're having. But of course, then if your friends uh, don't drink red wine or they don't like certain things, then you're like, okay, I'll edit what I'm doing based on what my friend likes, where we get something by the glass. Then I don't have to, it doesn't matter. But a lot of times if I get something by the glass and they get something by the glass, I'm like, I want to taste what they got. How to go. So there's a lot of things there that I'm thinking about. But if you're tasting a wine and you're having food, it's fun to have the wine first and then the food versus have the food first and then the wine and kind of see, is this working? Is it, if it's a good pairing, both things enhance the flavor of the other thing. So you're just like, oh my God, these taste so good together. That's the kind of reaction I want. So when I'm making something, I want you to have that feeling too.
That's awesome. And it's so true because it really does enhance the experience and it
Mhm,
brings in all the tastes and the flavors and highlights. Like a lot of things in life, you put the
mm.
right two objects together and they highlight each other and the experience ends up being way better. Julie, how can people get in touch with you if they want to connect with you?
So I actually have a website. Uh, it's Shay Julie S. Because my last name is Schreiber and nobody can pronounce it or spell it. So Shay, it means the house of Chez Julie S.com. And I have a website and you can uh through that you can find me. You can get I think I have my phone number and my email address, but you can find me through that. Or
Aw-
LinkedIn, you can find me there as well. But then you have
Awesome.
to know how to spell my name.
Well, thank you, Julie, for all of your insight today.
Thank you.
A
This
few of
was
our key,
I'm sorry. This was just really, an interesting conversation, so thank you very much.
of course. And thank you for being on. And a few of our key takeaways from today's conversation is making is an art, but is also problem solving. Sometimes you have to step up and solve the problems and really dive into the nitty gritty of things. But it is also an art form of really understanding pairings, senses, and every aspect of the process. As well, sometimes you cannot think about how much something that you're working on costs and really look at it as what is the objective, because we get overwhelmed sometimes when we know something costs a lot, or if we make a mistake how much money we will end up losing. But at the end of the day, that also adds a lot of pressure to yourself and the end goal. So when you look at it as an individual task, you will end up taking some of that pressure away. As well as when you want to taste wine or you're having different wines, think about taking sparkling water. You know, a lot of times people just give you water. Oh, taste water, it'll clean your palate. I love how you mentioned sparkling water. I will be using that trick moving forward now in between tasting different wines or meals. And that's a great suggestion. As well as if you go out and you're looking to eat and drink, think about what food you're going to order first, or if you're making a lot of meals and you want to pair it with a good wine, think about what kind of food you're going to have. It helps eliminate all the options in wines and narrow it down right off the bat for you. But as Julie had mentioned, by picking the right wine with the food, you will end up highlighting both of them and creating such an experience. This was a great episode with our top-notch guest, Julie Schreiber. Thank you for listening and have a successful day.